Alcatraz, the prison that was built on an island surrounded by water from all sides. A prison that used to be a proverb and is believed to be the most fortified prison in the world and possibly in history. Even despite the many attempts to escape from it, not a single operation succeeded, except for one operation. But it is a story that you may have come across before. But today, you will hear it with new details that I don't think you have heard before. I will tell you the story of the Great Escape from Alcatraz prison. This story happened from the year 1962, meaning it has been about 60 years. So many people talked about it and you may have passed it before. But today I will bring it to you with very interesting detail. Grab a cup of coffee and subscribe if you love stories like this, and let's begin. Why is the escape from Alcatraz considered one of the greatest escapes in history? The main reason, my friends, is the legend that surrounded this impenetrable and fortified prison. This prison was opened in the year 1934, and within 28 years, no one was able to escape from it. Only in the year 1962. And only 1 year later, the prison was closed in the year 1963. Anyone who looks at the dates always believes that the reason for the closure was the escape. This escape destroyed the myth of the prison, to the point that they were closed. But the official declared reason for the closure was the high costs of running the prison. But even with this, it means that this escape incident had a slight impact on the issue of closing the prison. The myth of this fortified prison lies in the fact that a prison was built on an island surrounded by salty and very cold seawater from all directions, and the beach of the city of San Francisco is approximately 2 kilometers away from the island. Even if you miraculously managed to escape from the prison walls, how would you get off the island? Except that it is a long distance to the beach, and the water is very, very cold. Even in the summer, they tell you that its temperature was not more than 12 degrees Celsius, so it was very cold water. And what made the matter even more difficult was that if there were additional myths, the prison administration and the guards said that the seawater around the island was surrounded by sharks from every direction. This means that even if the prisoner reached the seawater and decided to swim in the cold water, it would attack him. Sharks are also one of the second myths. After it was that all the Alcatraz guards are professionals in shooting, and they have orders to shoot any prisoner who tries to escape in direct second. And whenever they see anyone escaping, they shoot him. These things are a lie, but the prison administration and the prison guards remained. They reinforce and spread it in order to strengthen the myth of the prison and erase the idea of escaping from the head of any prisoner. This prison was where they put people who wanted to tell them that you are finished. Forget the idea that you will be released from this prison before your sentence ends, that there is no escape. There is no outside world at all, not even in your dreams. Thus they used to put in prison some hardened criminals who we feared would escape. Famous examples of some of these people were Al Capone, famous leader of the American mafia gangs, and then you have disgraceful Gene Kelly, the well-known gangster and one of the very dangerous criminal. With all this, do you expect that a group of the most notorious criminals will remain sitting there, polite, without any attempts to escape? Of course not. During the period when Alcatraz was open, there were 14 escape attempts, but all of these attempts failed, and their friends either got caught or killed, except for one attempt. That is our story today. This is the escape that will destroy the reputation of Alcatraz. It will destroy the legend of fortification. Let us begin by getting to know the prisoners who planned and carried out the operation. First was named Alan West, the second was named Frank Morse, and the third and fourth were in reality 2 brothers named John Anglin and Clarence Anglin. I once heard this story before. They were 3 who escaped from Alcatraz prison. How did they become 4? I'm telling you, your words are actually true, my friend. They were 3 people. They were the ones who escaped from Alcatraz prison, Frank and the 2 brothers, John and Clarence. What happened to Alan West? Why didn't he run away with them? The reason is that he had a problem one night. The escape, we will talk about it later, when we talk about the details of what happened that night. In reality, he claims that he was the one who had the idea of escaping. Imagine that you are the one who came up with the idea, and your friends are escaping, and you cannot imagine the betrayal. The important thing is that these four had previous operations to escape from prison. But of course we catch him after that, and so on. We did not say that those who try to escape from prisons are brought to Alcatraz so that they can get the idea of escaping out of their heads again. Before I go into the details of the events, I want you to try to memorize the names of these four people. But their first names are Alan, Frank, and the brothers John and Clarence. This could be a good thing in order to follow the details of the story better. And for example, I didn't tell you yet, the one who came up with the basic idea was that Alan West assigned the prisoners work to them inside the prison. Cleaning work, carpentry work, repairs, etc. One day, the task of cleaning the roof of the cells was assigned to Alan West, meaning the place he is in now, which appears in front of you, is the area that is located above the cells. Prisoners were cleaning this area, and he noticed that there was an opening with a ventilation hole leading to the roof of the prison building. He felt that this opening might be weak, because it was not covered with cement like the rest of the openings, with iron bars on them, of course. But if someone wanted to get out of it, it would be much easier than any other opening. If that happened, a way to break or cut the iron bars on the vent. Perhaps this is a way to get out of the prison. He went to Alan West and told Frank Morris about the matter. Frank Morris was locked in the cell next to his own, and two of the cells were almost above the ventilation hole that Alan West had discovered. Frank Morris began to think. He gives the details of an elaborate escape plan. It is true that Alan West was the one who had the basic idea, and he was the one who discovered the opening. Frank Morris was the one who devised the plan, because he was the smartest one of them. In fact, he tells you that this man, according to prison records, has an IQ level of 133, meaning he is very, very smart since he arrived. To the level of genius, but this IQ level is considered to be in the top 2% of people in the world. It is said that Maurice began to hatch the plan, and the first thing other than him was that he invited the brothers John and Clarence, whose cells were also next to Frank and Alan's cell, and invited them to join them in the plan to escape this very small distance. Between their cells was one of the most important factors that helped them communicate permanently. The only way to escape was through the opening of the ventilation pipe that Alan West discovered, which was located above. It was through a corridor located behind their cells. These cells they were in had spaces and corridors behind them for sanitary installations. As for the facilities, the goal is for them to get out of their cells into this corridor, and they can easily get out of the pipes until they reach the ventilation hole above. From there, they cut the iron bars on the opening, and then they go back to the roof of the prison. The question returns, how will they be able to get out of their cells into the corridor? There were small ventilation holes in each of their cells, but they were so small that it was impossible for them to pass their huge bodies through. Frank Morse, who became the leader of the operation and the mastermind of the plan, noticed that the prison walls had become very weak and had been in use for many years, and no maintenance had been done on them, especially since the salt water from the sea began to affect the prison walls greatly. So it became in fact easy to dig in these walls. But in order to dig after that, they needed tools. But from where could they get such tools? The group somehow decided that they were smuggling tablespoons of food for the sake of fornication, and in fact, these tablespoons of food they continued to dig today. After the second, and of course as you can imagine, the process took a very long time. They sat digging in the walls with spoons, so the subject took months until they were able to expand these holes to a size suitable for their bodies. Of course, during this period of digging, they must maintain the secrecy of their work. They must not let any of the guards see or hear them. One of the theories is that they were usually working when the other prisoners were playing musical instruments. Yes, every night, the prisoners were allowed to play musical instruments for an hour to an hour and a quarter. It is believed that they were working the most during this hour because the sound of the playing drowned out the sound of the drilling. And yet it was in some cases. Sometimes there is maintenance work they do in the prison, and it is a nuisance. Throughout the group, they start digging at any time. At least one of them keeps monitoring the situation, and the place sees if there is a guard coming to check on them. And nothing, because the Alcatraz prison had many guards. He tells you that the percentage of guards in it was higher than in any other prison in America, compared to the number of prisoners, of course, and these guards were always compiling a sudden census of the prisoners at any time. Any time, I expect that suddenly they would say, come on about you, so they were our companions. They had to have their eyes open and be fully attentive, which was helping after the rest of the prisoners. Those who were in the cells around me knew their escape plan. They could see them digging in the wall, and none of them went and snitched on them, and nothing. On the contrary, they were helping them. May God be upon you. May God be upon you. Did you see the brotherhood, guys? Did you see the altruism? Learn the prisoners. Alcatraz means they did not see them escaping, and they said they entered us, and I will not inform you. No, on the contrary, things are easy and everyone is cooperating. The FBI report tells you to mention that the number of prisoners who knew about the escape operation may reach 80 prisoners, and not one of them spoke to 80 prisoners. This was approximately the number of half of the prisoners. Those who were in Alcatraz at the time, imagine half of the prison knew, and not one of them said the word bro. But if you are enjoying the clip, do not forget to press the like button. This thing motivates me and continues with the video. It will help the video spread more, though don't forget to press like if you enjoyed it. Of course, during this drilling process, they needed to cover these holes. It's no use for the holes to remain exposed while they were digging in them. They made cardboard panels that they flattened in the prison workshop and poured them in the same colors as the walls of their cells. They then used some cement to hold them in place. In their place, these cardboard panels took over the task of covering the openings. And then on top of that, they were careful to put any items they had in front of these openings, such as musical instruments, clothes, or anything they had in the cell, in order to cover them more. The important thing is that finally, after several months of work, they were able to dig enough openings for it to pass through. Their bodies through it, but this digging process was just the first stage. Their goal was not to get out of the prison, and that's it. They had to find a way to get out of the island, and perhaps this was the most difficult stage. In order to cross on the water, they had to fix a boat in some way. They had to find a way to fix a boat. They did. There was an article in one of the mechanical magazines that was present in the prison. They found an article that talked about how you could make a rubber boat and a life jacket using raincoats. Raincoats were widely available in the prison, and no one was counting them. Little by little, they started collecting these coats and stealing them from everywhere in the prison. And the other two records were cooperating with them and helping them, and he was actually able to collect 50 of these raincoats. But then the problem is where they are going to store all these coats. Also, they had to get a space, meaning it would be like the workshop they work in to make the rubber boat and life jacket. Where can they get a space like this? Only thing that was suitable was the space above their cells. The space in which Alan West discovered the opening of the ventilation pipe. But the problem with this space is that it is exposed and there are guards always present, keeping their eyes on the prisoners who are working in this space. What is the solution? I wonder. Alan West with instructions from Frank the mastermind. A very, very clever trick, and this may have been the most important trick in the entire escape process. Alan West had the task of constantly cleaning this space above the cells. He convinced the guards that he had to hang sheets and blankets covering the walls of this space so that the dust would not go down while he was cleaning. He even kept making movements like he throws dust over them to show them that this is a problem and he must solve it by covering the walls. And in fact, the plan worked, and they allowed him to hang sheets and sheets on the bars that surrounded the area. This area above their cells, so they had a nice area and an excellent place, covered and far from the eyes of the guard. They could use it as a workshop in which to work. This thing, of course, was a serious security error to the utmost degree and unjust leniency on the part of the guards. This thing means like a scandal for most. It is a shameful thing that the guards in the prison, which is supposed to be the most fortified prison in the world, allow something like this to the extent that this incident or this topic was hidden from the initial reports and did not appear. Except in the year 1990, meaning 20 years after this incident, the issue was actually ashamed. This movement is what allowed the plan to be completed. Without this movement, this plan would have been impossible. These sheets and sheets remained hanging and covering the place for 2 full months. During these 2 months, our friends took turns going out to the area. They were working on making a rubber boat and a life jacket, and they were still busy cutting the bars on the opening of the ventilation pipe, the opening that was supposed to bring them to the surface. In fact, they turned the place into a respectable workshop. They were able to smuggle many tools and items to it to help them in their work. But of course, one of the main problems is that they ration. They would not be present in their cells. The guards would always check on them at surprising times. What would they do? If one of them was working upstairs and suddenly a guard passed by his cell, and what happened was that the whole plan was ruined. What if they made fake heads to fool the guards that they were sleeping? Almost all their work was. At night, he would put the heads on pillows and cover with a blanket. When the guard came to check on them at night, he would clearly see the head sleeping on the pillow, and then he would go to the next cell without even thinking about it. These pictures that you see in front of you are the real pictures of the fake heads that are still there. They are preserved to this day in the prison archive. Question is, how did they make these heads? Where did they get the materials? In fact, all the materials were available in their cells. All they needed to flatten these heads was some soap with cement dust. Those who took it out of the excavation operations and brought toilet paper mixed it with a paste that they took from one of the prison workshops. They also had dyes that they took from the prison workshops. They mixed them together and estimated that they were making these heads. But the most important part of these heads was the hair. The hair was a difficult thing. They were fake. In fact, they did not fake the real hair, but where did they get it from? Clarence Anglin, one of the brothers, worked in the prison barber. He was the one who handled the process of providing hair for the fake heads. He used to bring with him quantities of the prisoners' hair every now and then until they had enough hair to put on the fake heads. This is the method. Those who used it to go out and work in the secret workshop every night had money that was above their cells. Of course, there was some rotation between them. They did not all go out together at once. The situation lasted for 2 months while they were working. They spread their mattresses on the rubber boat and the life jacket. After they finally finished, the promised day came, the day of escape. The big one was on June 11th, 1962. After bedtime came and the prison lights went out at 9:30 in the evening, the 4 prisoners began the great escape. Each one of them put the fake head he had on the pillow and covered it with a blanket so that if any guard passed by them and thought they were sleeping, they opened holes. The ventilation that they had been digging for over the past months, and they went out to the back corridor behind their cells. Corridor would lead them to his workshop, and then to open the ventilation pipe would take them to the roof of the prison, but only 3 of them came out of the cells. The one that was missing was Alan West, and Alan was unable to open the ventilation hole. It is not clear what exactly happened in his cell, but it seems that he used more cement and materials than necessary to cover the hole. And because he had not opened it for several days, these materials hardened greatly, and digging it a second time was not easy at all. When the second 3 saw the situation like this, they told him, "We are advancing, and between mowing the boat and other things, and you tried to catch up with us as quickly as you could." Alan West kept trying to dig the hole in his cell, and the remaining 3 came forward. First thing they did was that they prepared the rubber boat and the life jacket, and then they removed the iron bars that were on the hole of the ventilation pipe that would bring them to the surface after they finished the preparations. After Alan West was unable to leave his cell, they decided to leave him behind. They had agreed before that if anything happened to any of them, the others would continue without him, each one for himself. But imagine, Adele, the oppression that Alan felt. I mean, he was the one who had the basic idea, and he was the one who got the breakthrough. Is that the second 3, Frank Morse and the brothers John and Clarence, were able to reach the roof, and quietly they crept in until they reached the walls, which were merely a net. They cut it with ease and crossed it to the beach. On the beach, they were able to inflate the rubber boat with air using a musical instrument that Frank Morse owned. Of course, they were modified so that it would not produce any sound. It was just air. At 7 in the morning, the wake-up bell rang in the prison, and the usual morning count of the prisoners began. Every prisoner was He had to be stopped inside his cell in front of the guards. When they arrived at Frank Morris's cell, the guard began calling him Frank, get up, once, twice, or 3 times. The guard put his hand in to move his head, and the shock was when the head fell and rolled in front of him on the ground. Of course, the prison command was soon notified. The sirens went off, and a very, very extensive search operation began. Everywhere, of course, the authorities were notified, and a large team from the FBI came to assist in the search and investigation operations. Of course, the first person to be interrogated was one West, because they saw the hole in his cell, so he was not able to hide the matter. It was clear that he was one of the team who tried to escape. But when they investigated, he was apparently cooperating with him and with them, because in any case, he had no other choice, but he believed that he hid some information in order not to reveal what his friends were going to do to him when they reached land. The Alcatraz guards wiped the entire island. There was no trace of them on the island, and this thing really confirms that they left to the sea on their boat. The authorities and the FBI used their boats to conduct a comprehensive survey of all the areas surrounding the island. They did not leave a spot around it. At the same time, the investigators were interrogating the prisoners, one after the other, but none of them were willing to provide any useful information. As we said, brother, the prison is an operation. The search was expanding more and more at a very rapid speed, and it was considered one of the largest search operations carried out by the FBI in history. But the group disappeared. There was no trace of them at all, and from that day to this day, they have not found any trace of the 3. And in fact, this complex escape from Alcatraz operation was a successful operation at all levels. The investigations, of course, did not stop and continued for many years. The FBI continued to investigate this case for 15 years until they handed it over to the local police. The FBI investigation officially ended with the result that these 3 drowned in the sea. But was this result really real? Was found after the searches were bags that were made of the same materials that raincoats are made of, the same coats that they used to make rubber boat and the life jacket. By the way, they got the life jacket, but they did not get the rubber boat. Inside these bags that they got after were in pictures and letters that clearly belonged to the brothers John Anglin and Clarence Anglin. They were pictures of them and their families, and letters that they used to write to them in prison. This means that the contents of these bags were supposed to be precious and very precious to the brothers, and it was impossible for them to give them up unless they perished or died in the middle of the sea. Biggest evidence is that they drowned in the sea, but at the same time many experts oppose this thing and say that it is impossible, and not one of them had a body float on the beach or was found during search operations. They are supposed to get their bodies easily. If they actually drowned, their bodies would be floating in the water, so they did not find a single body with all the extensive and intense searches that they conducted. For many experts, this thing was completely illogical, and yet, in a famous photo said to be of the brothers John and Clarence, it appeared in the year 1975. It is said that this photo was in Brazil, meaning after their escape, they moved to Brazil and lived there. But also this picture contains give and take and a lot of talk. Whether it is really theirs or not, there is nothing 100% certain. I will tell you that the mother of these 2 brothers, the mother of John and Clarence, used to receive bouquets of roses from time to time from an unknown source, from an unknown sender. So, this is the unknown person who sends greeting letters and roses to their mother, without any apparent insult. And also in the year 2013, it is said that a letter reached the FBI from someone claiming to be John Anglin, one of the brothers. This letter, this person claiming to be John Anglin, says that he actually escaped and succeeded in the escape operation, he and the 2 who were with him, but he is currently in a bad situation. He has advanced in age, now he is 83 years old, and cancer is approaching. He is ready to give himself up in exchange for treatment. If enjoyed this story, I would really appreciate if you subscribed and liked the video, and you can watch the great He's of Baco Rio, when the robbers fooled the police with only ordering pizza. A very exciting story. Watch now from here.